Hello and welcome to So, Hear Me Out, a podcast from London's Southbank Centre where we dive into classical music and the big questions it can help us to explore.
I'm Gillian Moore, broadcaster, writer and artistic associate here at Southbank Centre.
And I'm Linton Stevens, broadcaster, musician and illustrator.
In each episode we start with a question, something that opens a door into the music. Then we each bring along a piece we think has something to say about it. And today we're tackling a question that ruffles feathers when we talk about classical music. Should film and video game scores count? Or are they outsiders crashing the party?
I'll be bringing in something from the world of gaming that's full of fire and theatrical flair. It's got the scale and grandeur of an opera, but the energy of a battle arena. It's the score to the 2002 Namco fighting game Soulcaliber II.
Can't wait to hear that. And I'll be sharing something that shows how a film score can serve the needs of a really contemporary story while wearing its musical history on its sleeve. I've chosen music that succeeds in feeling both alien and human at the same time. It's Mica Levi's eerie and unsettling score for Jonathan Glazer's 2013 movie Under the Skin.
Such a great choice. These are scores that live outside the concert hall, yet they draw on centuries of musical craft, and they're asking us to hear differently, to rethink what belongs in the classical tradition.
So whether you're a gamer or a film buff or just curious about how all this connects to classical music,
join us as we delve into some great music together.
This is episode 7, our film and video game scores proper classical music. So this question is current because it came up in a recent article, an interview with the great film composer John Williams.
Who, of course, featured in one of our previous episodes with his score to Star Wars.
Yeah. And John Williams said something really quite surprising. He said, just the idea that film music has the same place in the concert hall as the best music in the canon is a mistaken notion, I think. And then he added, a lot of film music is ephemeral. It's certainly fragmentary, and until somebody reconstructs it, it isn't anything that we can even consider as a concert piece. So the great John Williams, whose music is played in concert halls without the films all the time, he's kind of saying that he doesn't think it's real classical music.
I think I agree and I disagree at the same time. I think you could deconstruct that in so many ways, including, he's an incredible composer, but does that dictate how everybody should see this music as well? Now, I do think there are purists out there who wouldn't acknowledge these categories, but I would also say it comes down to defining genre boundaries, and nobody and everybody is right. I think it's really interesting, and I think we'll dig into a lot of that in this episode.
And it's interesting for me also that a lot of composers who are really known as classical composers, or a number of important ones like Vaughan Williams, for example, or Korngold, wrote really important film scores. But there's also another kind of relationship between film and classical music, which is that some film directors have used existing classical music
it's gone
to
the other
great
way
effect.
around.
Yeah. You think of that Mozart piano concerto in the Elvira Madigan film from the 70s. Maybe you don't remember that film,
I don't
but
quite
it was
remember that far back.
But that made that slow movement of the C major piano concerto really, really, really
The
famous.
King's Speech.
The King's Speech with Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. Now, that
March.
that scene in the King's Speech where he's learning to speak, and underneath him learning to speak without a stammer, you hear the slow build of the funeral march from Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. And without that music, I mean, that scene would not make everybody cry, which it certainly did with me when I first saw it. And then you've got Stanley Kubrick's approach. So for his 1968 film, 2001: A Space Odyssey, he actually commissioned a film composer, Alex North, to write an original score. But he was working with in the sort of edits, he was working with just recordings of existing music, which included George Ligoti's really amazing, cloudy, contemporary 20th century music. It included The Blue Danube by Richard Strauss, and it included the opening sequence, the Richard Strauss Also sprach Zarathustra, which people now just call, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Which, by the way, has the longest low C on a contrabassoon of any piece. You have to have lungs of steel. I just thought I'd tell you that.
I was wondering how long in the pod it would take you to get a bassoon anecdote in there. Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Linton. But with Kubrick, I mean, it's just amazing the way he's associated this very different kind of music. So the Blue Danube, which is this Viennese waltz from the 19th century, all kind of elegant ballrooms, is and swirling big dresses, is used to accompany spaceships floating in space. I think now, in the popular imagination, it's associated with the dawn of mankind and with apes at the beginning.
Yeah. So this is all really fascinating stuff, and we thought it'd be great to try and tackle this mammoth question by looking at and examining one film score and one video game score.
And I'll kick off with Mica Levi's score to Under the Skin. Well, if you haven't seen the movie, this is a film about an alien, and it's an alien played by Scarlett Johansson. But it's a particularly strange alien film genre. The setting, for me at least, is very ordinary. It's Glasgow. It's Glasgow at night and in the twilight, and sometimes it's in broad, harsh daylight. Real Glaswegians, unaware till afterwards that they're being filmed, are falling out of nightclubs or shopping in Argyle Street or gamely getting into the alien's white van when she offers them a lift. All of these Glaswegians look and sound like they could be related to me. It's also dark forests and bleak mountains in the Highlands and scary rock beaches on the East Coast. It's not, shall we say, an idealised version of Scotland.
So it's a fantasy movie, but do you think it does depict in any kind of real way the city of Glasgow?
I think it could be anywhere.
Right.
But I think the fact that it is Glasgow's particular weather, I mean, we see a lot of the rain and the light of it, I think it gives it, much as I love my native city, it gives it a certain kind of
tone.
Yeah, definitely a certain kind of tone as Scarlett Johansson prowls around the city streets in her white van.
Right. Does sound very ominous.
So let's give a taste of the score. This track is called Love, and it's one of the most popular songs by Mica Levi. Even if you haven't seen the movie, it's something that you might recognise. Love by Mica Levi from Under the Skin, out on Rough Trade Records. Have you heard it before?
I haven't heard it before, but from your description of Glasgow and the premise of the movie, it immediately takes me to that kind of image in my head of what you described.
It's so intense, isn't it? It's absolutely...
Do you like that track?
I love it.
Okay.
I absolutely love it.
What do you love about that track?
I love the absolutely sort of almost inhuman intensity of it. And that sort of, as you say, that bedrock of just, simple, triadic, major
and
chord.
it is, but it's really uncomfortable as well.
Yeah.
When you sit on that major chord for so long.
Yeah, it's unnatural.
Yeah.
And I'll talk in a moment about why that is unnatural. But there's sort of twistedness in the middle. There's a sort of twisty melody that comes in the middle, which makes you really know immediately that all is not well.
So Mica Levi, I know Mica from pop music.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they crossed over into classical as well.
Yeah, they first emerged in the 21st century with their band Mikachu and the Shapes, and first made waves in film music with this score for Under the Skin. After Under the Skin, they went on to earn an Oscar nomination for Jackie, the film about Jackie Kennedy, Jackie Onassis, and recently won at Cannes for The Zone of Interest. The music is bold and unsettling and unforgettable.
Is Mica, this is a big question that I think plays a lot into our provocation today, is Mica classically trained?
Absolutely classically trained. They trained at the Guildhall School of Music and, have written for orchestras as a composer,
right.
yeah, and as a viola player, which
right.
is partly why we hear that string sound. And the score for Under the Skin really wears that training on its sleeve. It's really, we'll talk about how many influences there are in there.
But I think that's a really important question in this whole argument of whether film music is proper music, because we often look for ways to legitimize or illegitimize people who have written film music. So there are so many film composers who, for example, don't read music or don't orchestrate their own scores. And I think that plays into this argument a lot sometimes. You've also programmed this, haven't you? So it's something that's quite close to your heart.
Yeah, we programmed it at Southbank Centre, I think a couple of years after it first came out. And actually, Mica was sort of slightly sceptical about the idea of doing this, although
with the film,
with the film, and it was it was huge. Royal Festival Hall was full, 2,500 people watching it and listening to the score, and it was live score played live by string players. But Mica was sceptical. I think, they've said afterwards that it's because they think that the score and the music and the film are one thing, and they belong together in the cinema, or
that's not far from what John Williams is saying. Though,
yeah, I think it is, and I think it's thinking about what happens when you're focusing actually on something else, when you've got a live orchestra there and you're watching that. I mean, I don't entirely agree, because I've had a lot of wonderful experiences in putting on film with live music. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey, we've done that many times at the Southbank Centre, and things like, Taxi Driver, the Scorsese movie with the amazing Bernard Herrmann score, or Brief Encounter. Oh, that's another film that uses a standard classical piece of music, the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto. But I think you get a kind of more 3D experience, a full theatrical experience. It's something different.
Do you think, because bear in mind the two examples we've given so far, so Mica and John Williams, they're both talking about it from their perspective, which is as the person who's had the brief to write the music to the images on screen, I don't think the music can exist without the images.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting in a film like Under the Skin is how the visual aspects really come into play to sort of up the element of weirdness in the film. But together with the music, that just adds something that does it big time. It ramps up the atmosphere by so many notches. So this Scarlett Johansson alien, she meets people and she sort of brilliantly feigns human interaction with them. It's, really very creepy, up to the point of sexual entrapment or seduction. And we, the viewer, are kind of in the mind of Scarlett Johansson's alien as she takes in this world that's alien to her. And we're also at some points in the mind of her victims, who she seduces and then annihilates. Your life force is being distilled by an alien, Mica says about this. It's not necessarily going to sound very nice. It's supposed to be physical, alarming, and hot. Creation by Mica Levi from Under the Skin on Rough Trade Records. That music is sort of teeming and jittery, and Mica said it represents what they call alien pressure, the teeming of another world that we can't see, pressurizing the Scarlett Johansson figure all the time under her skin, as it were, in this new world of Glasgow. So she's driving round. She looks like a human, albeit, a very sort of glamorous one with a black wig and amazing red lipstick. But underneath, as she looks out on this city, she's this is her alien world that's going on under her skin. I also think it's really interesting to think about the sounds that Mica's using here as the starting point for this score. They used their own instrument, the viola, to record, and then added other live string players and synthesized instruments and treating the live instruments electronically. Mica says, I'm looking to the instruments to find something identifiably human in them, and then slowing things down or changing the pitch and making it feel uncomfortable. So I guess they're trying to pervert the material, to take it into an alien world, they say, to make it sound creepy but also sexy.
I think there's a really interesting point there about the use of live instruments and not entirely synthesized, because there is that connection that we get in this film, in any music that we listen to, when we know that it's a human making that sound, there's an instant connection to it. You know, that a human is making that music, and then to distort that or to make it into something more uncomfortable and creepy, I think there's a real genius in that.
Let's hear another key theme in the score. I mentioned the word sexy. So this is the kind of seductive music. Mica says they looked at strip club music as an inspiration for this. So first we hear a slow drum beat, which sounds so predatory. It's music for when Scarlett Johansson is on the prowl. When we hear that sound and see a man in the frame, we kind of know he's had it, he's for it. And then there's this so-called seductive melody sliding upwards and slithering upwards. Mica talks about it being fake, like Scarlett Johansson's putting on this allure. You know, she puts on her lipstick. That's a big theme in the film. And Scarlett Johansson, the actor, does that brilliantly through her acting and through the costume and makeup. Andrew Void by Mica Levi from Under the Skin on Rough Trade Records.
It did feel very sultry with the very high slides. Yada-dee. Like that is a very sultry theme. Yada-dee.
Yeah.
In another context, it could be almost romantic.
Well, it's sort of slithering music, isn't it? It's got this sexiness to it.
There is a very clear draw, a very clear influence from what we might consider classical music, what purists might say that exists very clearly in the classical genre, the classical canon. This is drawing right out of that.
I think it's interesting that the music tells us that this alien, in the form of Scarlett Johansson, doesn't remain a blank canvas, a monster of coldness throughout the film. She does gradually seem to acquire empathy, and we do begin to sympathise with her as the film goes on, and that's really reflected and told in the music. So late on in the film, she's shown kindness by a man. There's a beautiful moment where he carries her over a puddle, and eventually there's a kind of love scene, a kind of thwarted sex scene. It's the most human moment for this alien, and the music reflects that in such an interesting way. It's kind of passionate love type music. It's climactic in the film, and it kind of makes me think of the most famous love music in the classical canon, the Liebestod, the love-death moment from Wagner's Tristan and Isolde. And interestingly, Mica says that this one most human moment in the film makes the strings as synthesized, as fake, if you like, as possible. So when Scarlett Johansson's working in the streets, says Mica, it's real instruments. And when she gets towards actual love, it's synthesized strings. The idea that these sounds of the synthesized strings can go on forever is what's appealing to Mica here. You know, a synthesizer doesn't have to take a bow stroke.
Its arm won't get tired.
Its arm won't get tired. So it's this sort of eternity of sound, which
there's an interesting juxtaposition of an alien pretending to be human, having a human moment, and using a synthesized sound to show, however beautiful that synthesized sound is, the fakeness of it. An alien could never feel a human emotion because it's not human. So where do we hear these synthesized strings, Gillian?
Well, we've heard it already at the top when we heard the love theme. It's a funny kind of love
that
theme,
very
if you
first
like.
thing that we listened to.
That intensity of sound is there because the strings are entirely, relentlessly synthesized. And this tells us that this is maybe a strange kind of love, but it could go on forever.
Do you know what I love about this?
What?
If you didn't have the slides between notes, they're like, it would be a really beautiful love theme. Like it could be really, it would sound so romantic and lush. But because of those strange slides between notes, forward and back, it just makes it, and it's not quite a full pitch that it moves either. It makes it sound artificial. It makes it sound like somebody who's imitating love.
It's got that twistedness about it. I mean, you feel this is a love that's not going to end well.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe like Wagner's Tristan and Isolde, it's love that contains death as well. It's love, death. And that makes it really particularly intense.
So we've kind of skirted around this question, but do you think this is justifiable as true classical music?
I guess what most classical music has is a kind of a narrative, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you look at this in an album, when you listen to this music in an album or on Spotify, whatever, you're getting these individual scenes. So what you don't have is a kind of continuity. I think that's partly what John Williams was saying, unless you stitch it into, there's lots of suites from film music, isn't there, which gives it a kind of narrative. So you can sit there for 15 minutes, half an hour, and listen to the whole piece like a symphony almost. But for this film, I think music like this just gives an extraordinary intensity, and it brings all the kind of armory of certainly 20th century classical music to bear on this 21st century creepy story. And for me, it just does the job brilliantly.
So, is this classical music?
I'm not sure I really care, actually.
I mean, if you want to go on a journey of musical development, listen to a Beethoven symphony or a Mahler symphony. But if you just want to go on an emotional journey, I think a film soundtrack does that as well. For me, it's a really interesting subject because I honestly believe film music is legitimate classical music. It draws on all the skills, as you've demonstrated with Mica, all the skills that one needs to train as a composer and more, to be able to put that kind of thing to film and to augment some of those feelings. I have absolutely no doubt of that. But I also think that this argument comes down to how the individual would classify it. And game music is another perfect example of this. Have a listen to this one. Healing Winds from Soulcaliber II's original soundtrack, performed by Project Soul and Bandai Namco Game Music. What were your thoughts of that?
Well, there was development in the moment, certainly. You know, there was a big build-up. You've got a full orchestra there. You've got strings doing what strings do. Well, one of the big things they do, which is a sort of very long, sustained, and then a bit of chugging music at the end. You've got French horns there, sort of doing quite, making me think of the music of Richard Strauss or Gustav Mahler from the beginning of the 20th century, this grandeur about it. it's a sound that builds intention, underpinned, and that this is the reason, I guess, why, it's got a particular dramatic purpose, underpinned by this percussion. Is it a drum kit? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so there's a snare drum.
Yes, just
giving it a kind of military feel.
Exactly. So it's music that sets its stall out very clearly. This is literally the first time I've heard this, and it's giving me an atmosphere that something big is about to happen, something grand.
So this is Healing Winds from the Soulcaliber II soundtrack. It's performed by Project Soul and Bandai Namco Game Music. And this is the first ever bit of computer game music that stuck out to me, that I really noticed. And I actually remember just listening to it. It's only a short extract of music, but I just listened to it on repeat. And it was heroic and majestic. And it's the first time I think I really acknowledged that this music was taking me into another world. It was like augmenting and bringing to life all of these characters. And I noticed it because it was the first time that I'd noticed instrumental music in a computer game sound world. And it had all these elements that you expect to find in a concert hall, in a piece that tells the story of, well, especially with that one, the story of a hero, those big brassy fanfares that you mentioned, and the rising hopeful melody and the expansive string writing. It really embodies something heroic for me, which is what the computer game is all about as well.
So that heroic thing, I mean, that really is. It's like a 19th century romantic thing. There's a piece by Richard Strauss called A Hero's Life, Ein Heldenleben. Beethoven, heroic symphony. So it's kind of in a long tradition. But when was this music written? When does this game come from? I am not a gamer.
That's okay. It was 2002, so right. 23 years ago as we talk today. So it's new. It's new in the history of classical music, but as you say, it is drawing on all of this classical tradition, all of these ways that we use orchestral and classical music to draw out and convey certain feelings. And these aren't kind of passive little snippets either. These are epic scores like Wagner operas. Here's another great example: God of War, Ragnarok. Almost 5.5 hours of music was written for that computer game. Would I want to listen to it in isolation? Probably not. But that's what it was made for. It was made for those snippets of the game where you're going through certain parts of the kind of mission to heighten the feeling. In the same way, we're hearing now orchestras take snippets from all of these games and put them into a suite. In the same way that opera composers used to take the snippets of their operas, put them into a suite, and then put them in the concert hall.
So if you're not much of a gamer, I have never been a gamer. So can you tell me something about Soulcaliber II, this game?
I chose this because it's the soundtrack from my teens and I was obsessed with the game and the score. It's a fighting game, which means there's hand-to-hand combat. And the series has had multiple sequels since. And as I've said, the lore has got deeper and richer and a lot more complicated as well. But in essence, long ago, an ordinary sword was forged by a blacksmith. But over the years, it was soaked in blood and hatred over hundreds of centuries, and it gained a life of its own, becoming basically evil, a sentient weapon. And only at this point, a noble king could resist the corruption it held over its wielder. But when his jealous son stole the sword, he was immediately possessed, and the king, heartbroken, had to kill him. Sounds like a Wagner opera, doesn't it?
My mouth is my jaw is on the floor. It is pure Wagner, this Wagner's Ring.
So he was forced to kill his son, and in his grief, he forged another sword, this time imbuing it with part of his soul to oppose the evil sword. So we've got a good sword and a bad sword. Generations later, both swords have now become legend, and all the fighting characters basically seek this sword, some for power, some to destroy it, and others for salvation or curiosity, because there's so many legends around the sword, nobody knows what it's really about. And each character in the game is on their own personal mission. So I'll tell you about a couple of different characters so you can understand why people have this impetus to go and search out this sword. There's Taki, who is a ninja demon hunter, and she wants to destroy the sword. She knows it's evil. There's Sophitia, a Greek warrior who was blessed by Hephaestus with holy weapons to carry out the same mission to destroy the sword. There is Voldo, a blind, mute guardian of a long-dead collector's vault, who wants to get hold of the sword for the collection and defend it for his master. And then there's Cervantes, also taken from, real-world mythology, a pirate who has been possessed by the sword, which, when he yields it, has split into two, and he uses it to consume other people's souls and make the sword stronger. And then you've got each kind of character has their own stage. Each stage has its own music that reflects the character and their story, making all of this lore as alive and rich as possible, as it can be. So let's have a little listen to one example of the music from a stage from one of these characters. Project Soul and Bandai Namco Game Music performed Labyrinth of Moonlight, taken from the Soulcaliber II original soundtrack. What do you make of that?
So this is something that's taking us perhaps to Asia, to South India, and in its sound world. I'm hearing kind of perhaps Indian percussion. I'm hearing this sort of sound in the middle, which could be a sitar to me.
Well, it's a bit closer to home, actually.
Oh, really?
It's called Labyrinth of Moonlight, that one, and it represents a secret labyrinth. So I think there's kind of that fantastical element there. But it's actually on the Isle of Crete, and we can hear how the music is used to blend real world and fantasy musical elements. So the harmonic minor scale, which we often associate with Eastern, let's say, traditions or Eastern cultures. And that's because the vault that one of the characters is protecting is full of all of these riches from around the world. They've been collected from around the world. So it's supposed to represent something fascinating and exciting and foreign and unknown to our kind of culture.
When you say the island of Crete, you mean ancient Crete?
Yes, ancient Crete.
Yes, because of course we can't possibly know what the music sounded like from there, apart from looking on the odd Grecian urn and seeing the sort of drawings of the instruments. But yes, that idea of
I think it's less to be like, this is Crete, and more to be like, this is a fantastical place of imagination and a fictitious place that's being brought to life.
So it's good old-fashioned exoticism, which
exactly
is
that.
Of course, a problematic idea.
Something we've discussed in another
we
podcast.
Have indeed, yes.
But it's that recognizable sound that will immediately take you to something, to somewhere, to another time, to another place, and that is what music is used as in computer games. Is to augment all of these fictitious things and bring them to life while you're playing the game. Let's have a listen to a different piece from this game soundtrack. Gives a completely different world, but I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what you get from this next one. That was Hellfire from Soulcaliber II's original soundtrack, performed by Project Soul and Bandai Namco Game Music. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's pretty epic and gothic. It's a pipe organ, and if I'm not wrong, it's a proper pipe organ. It's nothing to do with, it's not electronic or synthesized. It's a pipe organ like you get in a cathedral or in the Royal Festival Hall, indeed, which has this amazing 1950s organ with 7,866 pipes. But it's sort of building in a very sort of, I guess, it's building grandeur. I mean, you think of a pipe organ, you think of grandeur, don't you? And then when the choir comes in, and again, that's human voices, isn't it? It's not, they're not synthesized voices. You have this, absolutely, well, I guess lo-fi sound, but it's a very grand sound. But what's happening in the game at this point?
Well, this is a perfect example, as you said, of this cinematic soundscape. This is when you get to the final boss and it's evil incarnate, it's demon spirit. For me, it immediately takes me to this horror world. I think of really the sound that it takes me to with the organ and the choir immediately makes me think of Philip Glass's score to Candyman, which is just this huge... it's just such a huge sound. And I think, we often associate the sound of the organ with church and things that are holy. But I think when it comes to things that are scary, there's a very thin line between what we consider to be holy and what we consider to be horror.
Oh, yes. The organ is absolutely associated with gothic horror ideas.
I think there's a reason that we're hearing all of these game scores start to move into the concert hall. And I think it's because in the 2010s, there was this renaissance of nostalgia, and orchestras started to augment all of these old scores, the older scores for some of these older games from the 80s and 90s, and even more current games, and put them onto the concert hall platform. I think partly because it pulled in crowds, it made money, but also because there's something amazing about hearing your favorite film score, your favorite game score live in a concert hall.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that, because I think often people who put on orchestral music think, maybe if we want to get a younger crowd or a wider crowd, different kind of crowd than go to symphonic concerts, we should really be having lots of visual things. But these game concerts of game music, it's just the orchestra, maybe a tiny bit of lighting, and they're just playing the music, and they are packed out. And people just love, don't they, hearing that music from their favourite games played live. They can see human beings actually doing it. And of course, who's recording these but orchestras? They're orchestras that might be playing a Beethoven symphony, a Mahler symphony one night, and then the next day they're in a studio recording using all the same skills, all the same musicians, some of the same kind of language as from Richard Strauss, as we were talking about, or Mahler. And that's a really legitimate part. I'm working a lot with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra in Glasgow at the moment, and they have a sound studio, and they're recording not only lots of movie scores, but lots of game scores as well. And it's a really important part of an orchestra's life. I'm not sure everybody realises that these things are performed by the same musicians that are doing...
And demand the same skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Demand really high-level skills. So,
Gillian, we've had so much discussion today, but have we answered the question, are film and video game scores proper classical music?
Well, just looking at my choice, I'm excited by this film score because it's absolutely full-on contemporary film music. I do have to admit that I sometimes find film scores can be a bit middle of the road, but what I love, a bit bland, but what I love here is that Mica Levi is pulling out all their training in avant-garde modernism alongside these pop-inflected sounds seen through a kind of distorting mirror. You've got the teeming, nervy textures Mica calls alien pressure, and the sinister, predatory seduction, and even love music. But it's all created with an uncompromising set of influences which we can trace back to lots of different kinds of classical music, in fact.
And that's the thing for me, whether it is film or game music, this is art music with a brief, but there is a real skill in being able to tap into that complex emotion and heighten the drama of the moment. And for me, Classical music, as I said, has now become an umbrella term, and it houses all sorts of forms. Film music and game music absolutely sit under it. It's proper music because it is. As you said, it's drawing on all these traditions, and with the right tweaking, it's concert music, and it carries value and credibility.
For me, the primary function of this music is still tied to its original setting, whether it's in film or game. Just as ballet scores belong to dance, film scores belong to the screen, and game scores to the gameplay. Sure, I'll happily listen to suites like Ravel's Daphnis and Chloe taken out of a ballet or Stravinsky's Firebird in the concert hall, just as I can enjoy Mica Levi's Under the Skin soundtrack or the music of Soulcaliber II on their own. But without the stage picture or the film's imagery or the immersive gameplay, something essential for me feels missing. The music's brilliant, but its full power lies in the world it's created for.
I'll go with that. I think, as Micah said and as John Williams said, without the image, something is missing. But whether it is on stage or on screen or in a game's console, these scores do remind us that classical music isn't frozen in time. It's constantly responding to the modern world. It's evolving, it's adapting, and film and video game composers are right there pushing it forward.
So, Hear Me Out is brought to you by the wonderful people at the Southbank Centre.
And produced by the brilliant team at Reduced Listening.
Thanks for spending time with us. If you liked this episode, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe share it with a friend.
We love exploring big ideas through music, and we've got plenty more to come.
So join us next time for another adventure. Until then, keep listening, keep questioning,
and keep letting music surprise you. See you next time.